Welcome to Establishing Sustained Collaborative Co-Teaching Relationships. I'm here today with my co-teaching partner, Dr. Michelle Damiani, and I am Dr. Alicia Drelick. We are happy to bring this virtual session to you today and look forward to collaborating in an upcoming live session. This training is brought to you by the LRC Resource Network and NJDOE Office of Special Education project. The Learning Resource Center network strives to provide educators, leaders, and families of students with disabilities support, services, and professional development. The LRC has 4 locations, 2 in North Jersey, 1 in Central New Jersey, and we are joining you here from the LRC-South at Rowan University. In today's video training, we will be looking at defining co-teaching, defining parity, and working on how to establish it with your co-teaching partner. We'll introduce a way to formalize parity through a co-teaching constitution, and we'll set you up to create your own co-teaching constitution with your partner. Before we get into our content, we want to ensure that we're establishing some norms for how we will proceed through this training and our expectations for our live conversation session. We want to ensure that we are using strength-based language when talking about both our colleagues and our students. This can help us demonstrate a growth mindset and our commitment to inclusive practices. We want to engage in solution-oriented discussions and focus on how to solve problems as opposed to dwelling in problems. We'll reflect on what is shared and ask for support or clarification when needed. Finally, we want to value everyone's time and work on staying focused on the topic at hand, actively listen, and ensure that we're engaging appropriately. Our overall goals for today's session is to build a foundational understanding of both co-teaching and parity. In this, we'll also review what co-teaching and parity are not. We'll examine some critical areas for practice for co-teaching and navigate through the co-teaching partnership by looking at a co-teaching constitution example. And then finally, we'll set you up so that you can develop and document the expectations you establish for yourself and your co-teacher.
So when we think about what is co-teaching, we're talking about a teaching arrangement where 2 or more teachers or educators are sharing the responsibility for teaching a group of students. And so in that teaching a group of students, thinking about planning instruction, delivering instruction, assessing students, and supporting the overall needs of the classroom. A key to this is parity, and we'll be talking about that. As we talk about co-teaching definitions, there is a difference here than when we're talking about teachers managing and supporting larger teams or working with paraprofessionals in the classroom. Here we're talking about 2 certified teachers working together to share the instructional and assessment responsibilities with students. Okay. What is co-teaching? Co-teaching has been likened to a partnership, a marriage, having a dance partner, a 2-person band, or like playing doubles tennis. I'll give you a moment to think about your favorite metaphor for co-teaching. Have something in mind? Dr. Drelick, what's our favorite?
We always liken our partnership to something very active, like playing doubles tennis. Some days it feels like we are winning, some days it feels like we're losing, and some days it feels like we're doing synchronized swimming on our more performative days.
This
So
is
whatever our co-teaching partnership is, it is highly active and
yes, this
competitive
it's
sometimes.
so very real for us, that metaphor, right? I feel like we are bouncing things back and forth and ideas back and forth and working in tandem all of the time to accomplish the things we need to accomplish. And so for us, I think we would pick that like playing doubles tennis. Okay. So we want to think about parity. Parity is absolutely critical in any co-teaching partnership. When we think about parity, we talk about parity, we're talking about the state of being equal or equity in the partnership. And equity in the partnership means in all aspects of the partnership. Ideally, building these successful co-teaching relationships and developing your shared expectations begins before the start of the school year or at any time in which you come to the partnership. And so we are, there various things are important in here, right? Forming relationships, understanding each other personally and professionally, identifying your strengths and needs personally, professionally, and in the partnership in terms of how you work and communicate, um, working together to support all students, a shared expectation around supporting all students, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and building an inclusive class culture with clear expectations for yourselves and your class. Okay, so tips for establishing parity. Right, recognizing that we have two certified teachers that come to these partnerships and that each of you bring different personal and professional needs and expertise, and that both of these are equally important and necessary to successful partnerships. And so thinking about your interests, things knowing about each other, knowing how you work, knowing some of these specifics about each other and sharing those to kind of establish a set of non-negotiables, if you will. These are the things that we absolutely need. These are the things that I'm flexible on, right? And even more importantly, recognizing and building on each other's strengths in a strength-based approach. Same idea, right? We talk about this with students, but remember this for ourselves, is that it is really an opportunity to be able to draw on each other's strengths. I think Dr. Drelick and I do this all the time in the classroom. One way that I think of when we do this, right, is um, writing things down, getting things on the board, right, getting things up in writing isn't necessarily Dr. Drelick's favorite, right? And it's something that I'm very seamless at. And so I will always jump to that task. And if there is a tech need, right? If we need to move forward something quickly, like she brings that to our partnership and she will jump right in and we are there to support each other. And so we know both about the needs and the strengths, and needs aren't a bad thing, right? Like it's just important that we work together. So honoring your expertise and your strengths that you both bring as teachers to the partnership. Another point that we want to talk about here is using inclusive language. So you see in parentheses there, we and our, the message that we send as co-teachers in our school communities, in the community, broadly, and how we talk about our students is really important. And that does trickle out both in terms of the culture in the school and in terms of the culture we create in our classroom. And so when we talk about we and our, we're thinking about our students, our shared expectations. And when we're talking about roles, responsibilities, things we need to do, right, in terms of everything that we need to accomplish in a co-teaching classroom, as teachers and on behalf of students, that is a shared enterprise. We, right? We are right. So, breaking down that I this, I that, right, or that any kind of division or dichotomy between our students. So when we're talking about inclusive language and you're thinking about the we and our, no matter where that is, whether it's written communication, whether it's something in your classroom, whether it's how you're modeling within the school and the space, whether it's when you're talking in a meeting, shared inclusive language. Parity is all about delegating responsibilities and equity, and we're going to be continue to talk about how to equitably do that. But remember to be flexible, remain willing to compromise, and to be reflective and open to feedback as you work through these processes. Okay, anticipate the challenges, and they will come up. They will come up, and working through them and working through them together is really the successful path forward there. And so do establish the time and spaces between each other to give yourselves that time and space you need to both be reflective, have critical conversations. If something is coming up, if something is brewing, if something is not working, address it so that it doesn't go unaddressed, unnoticed, and people don't feel heard, right? And so taking the time to care for each other and your professional partnership really goes a long way. Think about how you're going to approach disagreements and maybe consider using a protocol for resolving conflicts. You might find some of the resources later in this presentation on the resource slide helpful in having those dialogues and those conversations. And continue to monitor how you're communicating with each other, keeping those communication lines open and checking in with each other frequently.
So now let's look at an activity that can help us really formalize our commitment to establishing both parity and an inclusive culture in our classroom. So what we're going to do is share our co-teaching constitution with you. This is something that we have created about 2 years ago. And Michelle and I are 4 years into our co-teaching partnership. So we've co-taught without this document and we've co-taught with this document. I think having a formalized commitment in writing really helped us first articulate our shared goals and develop a shared language for how we talk about what we want to do. I also think that formalizing this in a document gave us something to refer to during our reflective sessions, our problem solving, and setting personal goals to improve both our own practice and our collaboration together. So you begin a constitution by establishing a preamble. And we view this statement as really honoring our vision and commitment to both ourselves, each other, and our students. So in the preamble that we created, we wanted to ensure that we were really focusing on our collaboration together, honoring our expertise, and really uniting our inclusive philosophies to influence our students' experience to ensure that it was a welcoming experience for all of our students. I'm going to let Michelle read our preamble and then we can get into our amendments.
Sure. So our preamble reads, we, the teachers of diverse experiences and skills, in order to form a more harmonious partnership, establish parity, ensure instructional integrity, and promote the well-being and progress of every student, and secure the gift of collaboration to ourselves and our class community, do ordain and establish this co-teaching constitution for the united purpose of fostering inclusively meeting the needs of all students.
Thank you. You know, I typically sing this part to the School of Rock theme of the Constitution song. So thank you for sharing that. And again, these are things that we are really jointly committing to together. And we use this preamble paragraph to really remind us of our collaborative goal. I'm going to pull up the example of our co-teaching constitution. And again, you have access to this in the resources for this presentation. So you can see in this document, we have our names on the co-teaching constitution, our preamble, followed by 10 amendments. And these amendments were put together, which I'll go back to our slides here. These amendments were put together based on a list of what we really wanted to focus on for building our collaborative relationship, managing classroom tasks, and fostering a sense of camaraderie through collaboration. So I'll highlight a few of our amendments and how we have used them in our discussions and reflective process. Typically before the beginning of a semester, Michelle and I will sit down and review our constitution. We might tweak and make some changes. We might set a goal of saying, I know that I need to do a little bit better on this. Last semester was a hard semester for me. I had some family issues, so I wasn't able to take on as much as the accountability as I typically do. So I'll make sure that I step up this way. So again, going through gives us some real talking points to set personal goals and joint goals. So looking at some of our amendments here, here's the first 5 amendments that we created. And I will start with Amendment 3, which is about shared accountability. So this is something that we work on specifically, and I'll read our goal: shared accountability. Co-teachers shall share accountability for academic and social progress for all students, ensuring that no individual bears a disproportionate load of work. And specifically with what Michelle and I co-teach together, my expertise tends to lend towards academic goals, and she specifically teaches a class on positive behavior support. So she really has a lot more of her hand in the content of our social and emotional support. We really talk about what this looks like and how we can support students in both of these domains. Because typically my class content relies on academic goals and assessment, and hers relies on behavior. So many times students are more open and willing to talk to her about what's going on. And she's very mindful of when to loop me in to add that added level of support when academic support is also needed. And then in our Fifth Amendment here revolves joint planning. And I'll read this again. Co-teachers shall allocate sufficient time for joint planning, incorporating the strengths, knowledge, and skills of each individual to benefit the learning environment. This is something that always comes up in our review of how we did or how we will move forward in our next semester. There is never enough time to plan the way that you want to plan. So it's typically a goal to find and allocate that time together, figuring out if meeting before class, after class, or at a different time. Sometimes we find it easy to talk on the way home when we're driving in the car, because it's a time when we're both sitting and can focus on one thing and not being pulled either direction professionally or personally. So this is typically something we come back to of how can we improve in allocating that time. The planning gets done, but what can we do to do it better? And then in our last set of amendments here are amendments 6 through 10. These really focus on our commitment to improving our own practice and supporting our students. So I will highlight Amendment 8 and 9 here. First is conflict resolution. Again, Michelle and I have been co-teaching together for 4 years, but there still needs to be discussions about things that we don't necessarily agree with because they come up. We've built in multiple checkpoints throughout our teaching time to discuss what might be a disagreement that we don't even know about. So we will again go through and say what's working, what's not working, what's working for you, what's not working for you, or what can we improve. So having the idea of a growth mindset, while it might not be a conflict, might allow you to get to some of the things that you can do better together and that you can do better to support your colleague in a co-teaching setting. And then finally, Amendment 9 is really our commitment to being adaptable and to help innovate. We're excited to be able to have the opportunity to co-teach together and to have two experts in the room. So we are really committed to challenging ourselves as teachers and introduce new tools or new strategies or practices in the classroom. So we do each semester try and introduce 3 or 4 either new tech tools or new learning activities to excite us about our co-teaching partnership and push us to innovate and connect with future practice. You will be able to create your own amendments with your co-teaching partner and focus on what is most important to you, your partnership, and your development as a professional. We hope that our co-teaching constitution can serve as a sample and a guide for you throughout this process.
Key takeaways. So in this presentation, highlights that we have talked about. We've talked about relationship building and communication as key to developing your professional partnership, recognizing your personal and professional needs. Parity is imperative in any co-teaching relationship. And so thinking about any place in space where you need to establish parity or equity, right? Equal shared responsibility is critically important. Maybe you'll share some of the points that we came up with in ours, and maybe you'll have some different ones. But the key is establishing that parity within your partnership. Discussing non-negotiables and anticipating those challenges. When you can anticipate them proactively and reacting to things that just go differently than we expect, right? Sometimes that happens. Things come up. We're always checking in with each other, right? How'd that go? How are you doing? Did we do okay? What do we need to do? I wasn't really comfortable with how that went, right? And to be able to have those conversations without feeling in any way, critical of each other, but simply working toward our shared goal is really, really important. So, discussing those non negotiables, working through the challenges, and formalizing your commitment to each other and making sure that those non negotiables and those expectations are clear in whatever way it's stated. We offered you the co teaching constitution with explicitly paying attention to all of the different interactions, right, that are necessary to guide your process, both for supporting each other, your own personal and professional growth, and most importantly, equity for our students. On this slide, there are some resources linked that you might find helpful as you work through your co-teaching partnership. We encourage you to explore those as they interest you, and we'll have an opportunity to engage with some of those in the live session. References supporting this work. And again, this is brought to you by the LRC-South. Thanks so much for joining us. You can stay connected with the LRC-South and some of the happenings as well as upcoming opportunities through the QR code on the slide, or connect with us on social media through any of your preferred outlets. Thank you.